Hello viewers, I'm Ron Grant and you're watching 284 Media. As the territory of the Virgin Islands continues to maneuver through these very difficult times, we are joined by the Honorable Minister for the 8th Electoral District, the Honorable Marlon Penn, who is also the leader of the opposition. We talk the Gambling and Betting Act, we talk cannabis, we talk restrictions that are now going to be imposed on businesses, and of course the state of the territory. All this and more after a word from our sponsors. You're watching 284 Media.
I love you, Penny. Run, Forrest, run!
Fire! Get on, move it.
Man, I'm sick of being in this house. I just want to go to the beach, go out, go just one day, and gather, just gather. I'm sick of being in this house.
Having withdrawals from being stuck in the house for so long? Are you tired of looking at your old photos and daydreaming about your next vacation? Well, BVI Staycation is back and there's so much to choose from. For more information on upcoming deals, follow us on Facebook at BVI Staycation. Get ready, BVI, for an adventure in paradise. It's time to vacation where we live.
Viewers, welcome back. You're watching 284 Media. Honorable Marlon A. Penn, District 8 Representative, and of course the leader of the opposition. Welcome back to 284 Media.
Good afternoon, Ron. Thanks for having me. Pleasure being here with you again.
Absolutely. Now, Honorable Penn, there have been a lot of happenings in the territory of the Virgin Islands recently. A lot of legislations not only brought forth in the House of Assembly, but also being passed. Let's begin by discussing the Gambling and Betting Act, which you had quite a lot to say as it pertains to where we're going with that in the House of Assembly. Tell me your thoughts on your position in that.
Well, Ron, again, like I said, thanks for having me, and a pleasant good day to the people of the Virgin Islands, especially the people of District 8. Ron, the Gambling and Betting Act is something that was, I would say, rushed through the Honorable House of Assembly. Something that we, as the opposition, expressed our concerns relating the manner in which it was done, the lack of consultation, not just with us as the people's representative, but consultation with the people of the territory. Something of that magnitude needed more discourse, needed more input, particularly on the issues that surround gambling, issues of social issues that come about with gambling, issues concerning locals and their participation in organized gambling. Though it's happening currently, we have to make sure that when we legislate, we ensure that the people understand what we're legislating, how it impacts their lives, and what we're going to do as a territory, as a leadership, as a government, to protect persons from some of the fallout that happens from legislations like gambling and the likes. So we were concerned that for the lack of consultation, the issues that came out, particularly with local involvement in gambling and betting, how we're going to manage that. One of the things that came out was the issue of putting together a fund, and they had no responsibility specifically for the authority or the commission to put things in place to protect persons on a social level. So we were very concerned on that piece of legislation. More specifically, we were concerned that we didn't have enough outcry from the public on it. I know it's something in other countries. One of the things that happened is that legislation of that magnitude went through what we call a referendum. The BVI has referendum legislation. I think the Referendum Act was done in 2002 that gives us the ability to bring legislation of that magnitude to the public for discourse. I don't know why the government didn't take that position. It never happened. But I think it's something that is there now. I know we had discussions on the past administration from the point of view of the parimutuel betting and the issue of the horse track and how Correct. We're going to be able to help finance that institution. That never came to the point of public consultation, but obviously the government rushed through this process, and this is where we are.
Well, Honorable Penn, I would remember in the last general elections leading up to that, I sat down with every single candidate who were running, whether it was on the government side at that time or the opposition, independent. And one of the questions that I asked each of you, and I think you may remember,
Yes.
was what are your thoughts on the legalization of gambling, legalization of marijuana, legalization of gay marriage? And different persons had a different take. I don't particularly remember what your stance was, but I would say this. Most of the responses that I did get were similar to what you're saying. We have to consult the people first, and once we do that, then we'll come up with a solid decision. Explain to me exactly what are your qualms with the Gambling and Betting Act. Now, the reason I'll ask you this, because as a voting member of the electorate, as a horse race enthusiast, it seems like a positive thing as it pertains to the pari-mutuel betting, but perhaps as a resident, I'm not understanding the other social ills that you're speaking about as it pertains to what this Gambling and Betting Act will bring to the territory. So please expound.
In terms of the manner in which it was implemented, of course, a public consultation is paramount. But the issue of a wholesale implementation, this piece of legislation didn't just go into the issue of pari-mutuel. It went broad-based. It went into lotteries.
Yes.
It went into online betting and gaming, casinos, the full gamut. It ran the full gamut in terms of gambling. You could gamble on almost anything as relates to this legislation, and the Commission has the flexibility to put certain things in place and put the structures in place for gambling and betting. And I think that's a stretch too far at this time. I think that's something that we needed to really have a proper conversation with the people about so they can understand what the implications are. I know in particular in places like St. Martin, where there's some serious social issues that come about because of gambling in the casino industry, where they had restrictions in place where persons, and particularly the locals, could only go to the casino, I think it was 2 times a month, in terms of to avoid that high traffic from the local traffic and the social issues that gambling cause in terms of the local population. We don't have those kind of constraints or restraints within our legislation. And it's a concern for me and as a concern for many of our colleagues. So I believe that something like this, when you're going to change the social fabric of your community, social and moral fabric, and legislate it, and put this into law, you need to have the input of the public. And the best way to go about something like this would have been through a referendum. And we have referendum legislation to allow the people of this territory to have a say. If the people want it, we put the proper safeguards in place to ensure that we protect them and protect them from the social issues and the fallouts that might occur. But we also have to ensure that not just the 13 of us cannot just change the entire landscape of the territory on our own. And surely not a 9-member government should have the power to do so. And that's why there's these type of checks and balances with referendums to give persons that opportunity to have a say in major shifts like this.
There are 2 things that come to mind when it comes to the whole Gambling and Betting Act. First and foremost, we have often been known as a Christian society here in the Virgin Islands, and if I may say so myself, I find that the church or the clergy, some of them have been vocal, others have not been. But I also want to point out that gambling in the Virgin Islands has been going on for a very long time. As I was a little boy, and still to this day, I see the selling of tickets in nooks and crannies of the different industries. There is gambling on the horse race track. What I want you to share your thoughts on is the law and order that would govern and continue to try to implement these strict measures as it pertains to illegal gambling and betting in the Virgin Islands. What are your thoughts?
And that's one of the arguments that the government members made in the debate, Ron, is that it's been going on, so might as well we legalize it.
That doesn't mean that it's okay.
Yeah, so it's prostitution. And I heard the Premier come out very vocal and said he's not going to legalize prostitution as the oldest profession, as we know on record. But the reality is that we have to make sure that once we do things that are going to make a major shift in the social, moral landscape of a territory, we have to ensure that the people are involved in the process. And that was not done. We didn't have enough consultation. We didn't have enough. And I am still not comfortable that the commission that is going to be established and the powers within the commission to ensure that the type of protections are in place for the people of this territory, to ensure that, for instance, casino gambling, I had a young man come up to me, particularly about the online gambling that's happening right now, the sport betting that's happening at the bars all around the territory. And he was very adamant. He was a partaker in this particular activity. He said to me, you need to do whatever you can to fight this because this thing has destroyed my family.
Wow.
It has crept into my family life. I'm unable to it had me crippled in terms of the entire approach. And thank God for COVID that he had to stay home and not get involved as he used to be.
Wow.
But it just shows that the impact that gambling has on person's life. And with COVID-19 and the dynamic shift that is going to occur, the only kind of betting that probably would happen right now is online betting. How are we going to regulate that? How are we going to protect our people from online betting? How is the commission going to be able to deal with those type of issues? If a major casino come into the territory today, are we going to put restrictions on locals? Would a casino come if those restrictions are in place? Because ultimately their business is to make money. And if the local population is not participating and people are not traveling as they used to, I mean, they might not come and set up shop. Lotteries, the margins for lotteries are very small. Does it make sense to really put things in place that could potentially have an adverse impact on your financial services business in terms of money laundering and other issues? These are things that we have to, if we had the opportunity, we should have debated publicly, had the discourse so that the public could be aware of some of the implications for these type of legislations and allow them to make a proper decision, an informed decision based on all the information. That wasn't done. I don't know what the haste was all about, but we're here, Ron, and as former President Obama said, election has consequences. I guess this is one of the consequences that we have to deal with.
Indeed. Now, you mentioned a very personal story that you shared with a resident.
Yeah.
Are you of the belief that as a result of COVID-19 and now with the enactment of the Gambling and Betting Act, that this leaves room for more desperation as persons are perhaps out of jobs and they could be more, they could tend to more lean towards gambling for a source of a quick income?
It is absolutely right, Ron. That is absolutely the case. And we see it happening right now. Persons prey on persons, people's vulnerability. People are vulnerable right now. Persons are out of a job, been out of a job, some persons for over 4 months, going on 5 months. Persons who are working on reduced hours. So there's a sense of desperation within persons right now in the economy and within the territory. And persons would latch on to any opportunity that they see or persons present to them as a good opportunity to earn a quick buck. We're hearing about, I saw that a financial FIA and Financial Services Commission, they put out a few bulletins and advisories warning the public of Ponzi schemes. I understand there's a program going on right now where persons are being solicited to invest $1,000 and get $10,000 in return. Something that doesn't sell a product, doesn't sell a service, but they offering you all these get rich quick schemes. We have to be mindful of these things, and we have to also be able to legislate to protect the people of this territory, especially when they're going through vulnerable times. Indeed.
Now let's continue on with the Cannabis Act. This has been a conversation in the territory of the Virgin Islands, most recently with the promises of 100 farmers or something to that extent, and it is now in the House. It's been debated and passed. Tell me about your thoughts as it pertains to the Cannabis Act for medical purposes.
Yeah, I want to say this out front, Ron. I've been on the record as supporting the decriminalization of cannabis for recreational use in this territory. Too many of our young people have been caught up in the law just for the fact that they've partaken in the use of cannabis. They've lost opportunities. I know professionals who use cannabis for recreational use. I don't think we should criminalize cannabis. The whole issue of it, using it for medicinal purposes, my concern was the numbers and the numbers that they premiered previous to Hurricanes Irma, previous to COVID, talked about the potential $5 million in revenue. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing numbers of up to $30 million in potential revenue within less than 2 or 3 months. I don't know if that's part of the marketing scheme to get person to jump on board to feel that there's this bag of money there for medical cannabis. But there are some details that we need to know as a public. I think the details weren't forthcoming. And the interesting thing about this, Ron, is that the day of the debate of the cannabis bill, we learned about the bill being on the agenda for debate the morning of the debate. Why is the secrecy? Why are we rushing or trying to hide and prevent the proper preparation and the public input on these matters. The minister had a meeting on Monday about this issue. One meeting is not sufficient to give the public enough information about what this means for them, how the farmers are going to be able to participate. Education is going to be critical to this act. Persons believe now that medicinal cannabis is legal, that they now could smoke at their leisure. That is not so. In fact, the penalties are even heavier through this bill. In terms of the farmers have to plant whatever the investor, whomever that investor is. I'm hearing discussion that they've already identified an investor.
Which we have not been privy to.
Exactly.
We don't know
the
who
public
the
has
investor
not had those privy to that information, privy to that discussion. And if that investor comes in and says that he wants to plant X strain or Y strain, those are the only things that the 100 farmers can plant.
Understood.
Persons are calling me saying that the minister and the ministry is saying that you come to your representative. The minister or the government has not spoken to any of us in terms of the process, how persons are going to be selected to be farmers in this process. So there's so much ambiguity, there's so much uncertainty in the process, and there's no education. We need to make sure that persons are aware that the penalties still exist for use of recreational use.
And they are even greater.
And they are greater under medicinal cannabis. One of the areas that we looked at is the Drug and Misuse Act. Subsequent to the passage of the medicinal cannabis, we looked at the Drug and Misuse Act, where we seek to look at the issue of decriminalization. There was some hurdles to that. I know the minister in his presentation talked about expunction of records, which is not the case. What we were able to do, for 5 grams of cannabis, which is equivalent, I had to do some research on this run, it's equivalent to about 5 dime bags. Okay. If you're caught with that, it's on the discretion of the DPP whether to file charges or not. If she deemed the evidence, based on evidence, that you're not distributing and you're just using it for recreational use. That is yet to be assented to by the governor. None of the acts before that we spoke about, neither the Betting and Gaming Act, nor the medicinal marijuana, or the amendments that were made to the Drug Misuse Act have not been assented to. So we're not sure yet if they're going to be assented to. The challenge that we have, I said early on in this presentation, Ron, is that I am for any kind of decriminalization of cannabis. I know there were some challenges with charters that we've signed on to through the UN that allows the whole illegalization or decriminalization, makes it very difficult. Another issue is instead of expunction of record, there's a clause that was added. So if you were in jail for, say, 6 months, and you, for cannabis-related issue, 6 months or to a year, after 2 years of the start of your sentence, you could get what you call a stay of your sentence. So it will get struck off of your record, which isn't the same as expunction of your record. Okay. But at least there's something in place to help persons who got on the other side of the law because of recreational use, and they could get a clean bill of their record to at least start to be reintegrated into society.
Correct.
I think that's a step in the right direction, and that's something that I wholeheartedly supported going forward in terms of making sure that people are properly reintegrated into the society.
You mentioned a few very valid points that I want to reiterate because many persons in the territory of the Virgin Islands are of the misconception that the newly enacted act, Cannabis Act, is free for all and that persons can just smoke freely. That is not the case.
It's not the case.
What we see here is a medical act being implemented for the medical use of cannabis. However, if you're caught with recreational use of marijuana, and like you mentioned, and I'm going to paraphrase, I think it's 5 dime bags of some sort.
Or 5 grams or less.
5 grams or less. You still face penalties of being incriminated, and the penalties are actually much higher. What I want to speak to is
you face penalties if the DPP deems, based on evidence,
necessary.
That
so it is on the DPP's discretion.
Yeah, whether if it's based on distribution or you're just using it for recreational use, which has to go through a court process.
Correct.
To prove that.
So when we speak about many legislators, many of your colleagues have spoken about expunging a person's record. Here's where I'm confused, and perhaps you could assist in some clarity. How do you expunge someone's record who has been incarcerated before for cannabis? How do you differentiate whether it, at the time, was medical use or recreational, with the fact that recreational use of marijuana is still illegal?
Well, in fact, that is the challenge that we have right there, right now, Ron. The Drug and Misuse Act doesn't speak specifically to medicinal. The Medical Cannabis Act speaks to the penalties are within that act.
Okay.
So it only speaks to the use of regular cannabis. And for instance, the medicinal cannabis, one of the things that I learned during this process is that it has a lower THC value. So it doesn't give you the high that you will get from the regular cannabis. So most persons who use cannabis for recreational purposes will not use medicinal cannabis. And if you're using medicinal cannabis, you have to get a prescription from an authorized doctor or pharmacist. Doctor will do a prescription, then you go to an authorized pharmacy to dispense the medicinal marijuana. So there's an entire process there in terms of getting medicinal cannabis. And the persons who are planting medicinal cannabis in the territory has to go through a very strict process in terms of what they plant within their groweries when these are established. And these are all going to be established through the investor. And the investor essentially controls the entire process. So if you are contracted to plant 2 strains of medicinal cannabis, that's all you can plant in a growery. You cannot experiment and plant your own strain. You can't plant regular marijuana. And those are the challenges, that's the reality of what the law really deals with. The issue of expunction of record only deals with persons who are caught up, not necessarily with medicinal cannabis, but cannabis in general. And I think it says that the law says that after you have, if you're in prison for a year or less, from the time of the beginning of your sentence up to 2 years thereafter, your record gets wiped. You'll get a stay of your record. And there's something that speaks to alternative sentencing as well. Gives us an opportunity to do different types of sentencing for persons who have run foul of the law for cannabis, not specifically medicinal cannabis.
Moving on, Honorable Penn, you mentioned in the House of Assembly, you made a statement, I'm going to quote, you mentioned that you are worried that the territory is moving almost to a Sodom and Gomorrah. Are you worried that perhaps in months to come or in years to come within this present administration that we're going to be hearing talks about further legalization, whether it's the legalization of gay marriage and other stuff? Is that a concern of yours?
It is a concern in terms of the pace in which the government is moving on this very, very controversial piece of legislation and not enough involvement of public consultation. So I would never say no. The Premier got up and he said that will not happen. It's left to be seen, so we'll see what happens. But in terms of the approach and how things are being done without proper consultation of the public, it strikes me as very, very disturbing the way that things are implemented and the public is left out in the dark in terms of their level of implementation. I hope that we do more consultation, more specifically with the public, but even with the legislators. It's very unfortunate that us as 13 legislators, the 4 of us on the opposition side didn't have the opportunity to weigh in on these very critical legislations in an informal setting. So at least we could speak to the experts, speak to persons who are the drafters of these legislation, so that when the public comes to us specifically with questions and concerns, we could adequately answer those questions and concerns based on our discussions with the professionals and the persons who drafted the legislations. But I am concerned on the pace and where we're doing some of these things, and it was left to be seen. The Premier said no, so we'll see.
You mentioned just now about the 4 members of the opposition not having adequate time and being privy to certain information. As a member of the opposition, a leader of the opposition, that is, do you sometimes feel left out of the loop as a member of the House of Assembly?
Yes, we are. And the reality is that the executive is the one that sets the agenda. The public has this misconception in terms of how the agenda is set, specifically in the House of Assembly. The leader of government business, who is the Premier, through the executive, which is the cabinet members, and his caucus, which is the backbenchers and his junior ministers, are the ones who essentially have the majority, sets the agenda with the Speaker of the House in terms of what legislations are coming forward for discussion, for implementation. And ultimately, it's supposed to be a courtesy to have a conversation with the opposition. It's the right thing to do. We typically would push to have informal discussions so we could understand what legislation is going to be coming in place, so that we could then question the experts, question the drafters of the legislation, so we can understand what the implications are for the people of the territory and the territory at large. Has not happened. It's not happening. As you see with these two very critical legislation, they were forced through within less than 2 weeks. We had gambling, and then we had, right after that, marijuana bill. I hope that's not the direction that we want to take this country, without proper consultation, not just with the public, but with the legislative branch of government. Because the legislature is an independent branch of the executive, and it should always be independent. That's why we have those separation of powers, where you have the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, all separated powers, so that the country could run without undue duress or interference on either branch.
Understood. Honorable Penn, recently the Honorable Premier of the Virgin Islands spoke to measures, as he put it, strict measures that will be put in place as it pertains to the business community in the ongoing fight against COVID-19, and measures that are going to be put in place if persons do not adhere to certain restrictions. What are your thoughts?
I actually saw that last night,
yes.
Ron. I saw that come out. I'm assuming it's out of a cabinet decision that was made with these measures. And it made me wonder, why now? Why all these strict, what seem to be almost draconian measures on enforcement, talking about fining businesses at a time when businesses are struggling and trying to make a dollar, when people are going through very hard times trying to honor their pay. Why now? If the government announced that we don't have any COVID cases, they announced that the measures that we have in place to ensure that persons that we are repatriated to the territory are repatriated in a safe way. Is there something happening that we don't know about? Again, it goes back to the lack of communication and clear communication to the public, to the leadership of the territory, so that we all could be on the same page in terms of what is happening. Businesses are going through a very stressful time right now, Ron. Everybody in this territory is going through a very stressful time. The Premier made available some monies recently, some $300,000, to assist us to help assist persons within our communities. Ron, when you see
for the district allocation.
The district allocation. When you see the needs that are coming forward, Ron, and when we do our due diligence, these are legitimate needs. A large portion of our territory is unemployed. People are going through a very difficult time right now. And to add undue stress, undue burden to that process without proper communication doesn't hold well for us moving forward. One of the key areas that I spoke about, Ron, and I continue to speak about, is the economy. In May of this year, as opposition, we put out our position in terms of the whole issue of helping persons through this transition, issue of getting the economy back up and running. We talked about safely putting in place measures to get our economy moving again. We looked at a timeline of September, where we could have a phased approach to reopening tourism. As you know, tourism has been closed since March. Over 4 months, going on the 5th month now, where a person within our industry have not received a paycheck. That's monies that they don't have to pay rent, monies they don't have to take care of their kids, feed their families, monies they don't have to pay their bills. Many of them have exacerbated their savings that they had. Now they have no savings. And to go another 3 to 4 months without any sign of what the government's plans are to reopen the economy, to move tourism forward in a safe, productive way. We are not being irresponsible around. We were very clear in terms of our approach. We thought it was important to do it during the time when things are slow. You put your safety protocols in place. You ensure that you put the things to protect persons coming into the territory, protect the workers on the ground, protect the citizens on the ground, and also start to get money flowing back in the economy, Ron. And we need to do that. We now have a situation, Ron, particularly in the marine industry, where we are seeing our boats leaving our shores. That industry, what got us going again after Hurricanes Irma and Maria, going to St. Thomas. Our USVI partners have for long tried and adjust their legislation, change their marketing strategy to attract that business to the U.S. Virgin Islands again. And they're making strides. Boats are registered in the U.S. Virgin Islands. They're opening up shop in the U.S. Virgin Islands. They're ultimately going to use the BVI waters. But what is happening, Ron, is that we're going to lose out on the provisioning. We're going to lose out on the taxes and the fees from those who are being registered. You might find boat yards being erected into St. Thomas in the USVI. Another loss for our boat yards here in the territory. We're going to lose out on mooring fees. Overall, it's a
domino effect, yeah.
It's a trickle-along effect, and we have to find the right balance. We have to find a way to coexist with COVID-19 in the territory. I am extremely concerned, Ron, about the economy. The government's expenditure every month is close to $26 million, Ron. That's $26 million every month. We already heard the numbers. Financial services is off by $10 million. We totally have tourism totally shut down, so we know that we're not getting revenue from tourism, if any of, and little of any at all. We talked about the unemployment levels in terms of tourism, close to 60% in terms of overall employment workforce. Tourism has more than 60% of the workforce. We have a reserve as of June 3rd. The consolidated fund and the reserve fund combined had about 120-something million dollars in it. At this pace, if we continue to spend $26 million every month, we will exacerbate all the funds that we have in our reserve and consolidated funds if we don't do something to get the economy going again. We've put forward some ideas to the government. We're hoping that they take us up on that offer. September is right there. We haven't seen the plan for reopening. We haven't seen the safety protocol that have developed to open safely and to get our people back up and running, and get the economy back up and running. We're hoping that they do something quickly to get this economy going again, as we're really in a really state of disrepair as it relates to the economy. We have to do better to move this country forward. We cannot continue on this way.
I thank you for those sentiments. As we spoke about the Gambling Betting Act as well as cannabis, do you think that the enactment of these two very important acts is somewhat of a desperate plea to figure out some sort of an income stream for the territory?
Yeah, I think that they're trying to find ways to diversify, but these are things history has shown us, specifically with the Cannabis Act. St. Vincent and Jamaica are way ahead of us. They've been at this for the last 5 years, and have yet to put a proper regime in place. These things take time. Gambling itself, to get a company to commit, to set up a lottery, to put an infrastructure in place, it takes some time. Even the pari-mutuel, there's a company in the U.S. Virgin Islands that signed an agreement to put that in place about 2 or 3 years ago, and they've yet to get it off the ground. These things take time, and it means that we need to figure out some immediate needs for the people of this territory. The government looked at the whole economic stimulus, some $62 million. At this pace, the 3 months is up now. We're now in June, July, going in July now. Persons have still yet to get assistance from this program. We're going into another 3 months, and persons are still in the same situation. Are we going to find another $40 million from Social Security to finance this? Because at our monthly expenditure of $26 million, we'll be out of money. We won't even have money in the reserve to pay for these expenses. So we have to get our economy moving again in a safe, in a productive way. And I think the Hotel and Commerce Association have put out some ideas. Many persons have put out ideas. We as an opposition have put forward our ideas, but we have to get going. Closing down the borders, keeping the persons locked up, penalizing persons and businesses is not economic strategy. It's not going to help us to get moving. It's not going to help our people to get back on their feet. We have to do better. We have to come up with a better strategy to make that happen.
You spoke about many persons giving suggestions, not only opposition, but the Hotel and Commerce Association presented some very valuable points to the government. Would you say that those points are being ignored?
I don't know if conversations are happening in private, but my conversations that I have with persons seem that they're not hearing anything in terms of a way forward. The businesses want to plan for reopening, but they cannot plan unless they know what the government's plans are in terms of a date, in terms of a timeline, in terms of what are the protocols they are expected to follow. These are things that need to be forthcoming, and businesses need opportunity and need time to put some of these things in place. And the businesses that I speak to and the people that I speak to that are in the tourism industry are saying that they're not hearing anything from the government on this front. And we're hopeful that soon that something comes forward, because these businesses are hurting. These businesses are very critical to raw survival of our economy. And the longer that we wait, the more damage is going to be done to these businesses. You go out, even now, Ron, you are asking persons who already are limited in funds to stimulate the economy. There's no money to spend in the economy. You go to the restaurants, the food, they have to throw away food, so they end up losing money instead of breaking even. All the bars and all the different type of businesses around the territory, they are not generating the revenue needed to run those organizations. So they're running just to turn on the lights. It's costing more than what they're bringing in every month.
Of course.
So they have to find more other avenues. They need more customers to come into the territory. And we can do it. We can do it safely. We have to just put our heads together, come up with the right safety protocols, whether it's pre-testing before persons come, test them again when they arrive in the territory. You use technology to track individuals as they come into the territory, and then you have the proper mechanism in place. If persons become ill, you quickly could isolate them, you quickly put them into quarantine. There are different things that we're doing. I see how Iceland has used technology, and they've been very effective in terms of the use of technology, in terms of tracking their guests when they come to the territory. And the BVI has a uniqueness about it. The type of tourists that come to the BVI, they're going to villas. We don't have that mass tourism that you see in Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic, and different countries. Persons go to villas, they go on a boat with their family, and they have that level of distancing already inherently built into the process, into our product. So we have to find a way to use that to our advantage. How we could isolate persons and they could come into the BVI, enjoy the beauty of the BVI, as well as getting our economy going again and keeping our workers safe and keeping our residents safe. We have to find a way to coexist with COVID-19, or else we're going to do irreversible damage to our economy moving forward.
With those statements, Honorable Penn, are you of the opinion of the sentiments that we should be moving towards reopening our borders sooner rather than later?
Yes, we should, because at the end of the day, if COVID-19 continues for the next 3 years, are we going to keep our economy closed for 3 years? The answer has to be no. I mean, but so we have to look at a practical approach to getting our country back up and running. As I said, safety first and foremost. How can we get our tourism economy back up and running, keep our people safe, keep our guests safe, and keep our workers safe? And September is right there. That's a date that we proposed. It's a date that we thought was feasible based on all the things that are happening around that time. It's a slower time for us as far as tourism. It gives us a time to test whatever protocols that we put in place. It gives us a time to really, really manage the process more efficiently and effectively, so that when the rush of persons come into the territory, we're more efficient in terms of whatever protocols we put in place. And I think the government needs to look at that as a date, look at some opportunities from what we've proposed in terms of getting tourism. And other persons have proposed, Hotel and Commons have proposed a very good plan. I listened to some of the things that they put out there, very good and insightful things. Other persons within the marine industry has put out some ideas for reopening. So we have to put all the stakeholders around the table and come up with a practical plan to move the economy forward.
Most definitely. Honorable Penn, we have covered quite a bit and we're much past our time. Nevertheless, before we go, I'd like you to give you an opportunity to close with some statements to not only the people of the territory, but to your valued constituents of the 8th electoral district. And just give us some closing remarks.
Thank you, Ron. I always look forward to having a conversation with you and the people of this territory, in particular the people of the 8th district who continue to send me to the House of Assembly to represent their interests, and the wider Virgin Islands, whom I represent as well. We are going through a very difficult time with COVID-19. I know many families are struggling to keep a roof over their head, to keep food on the table. We have to work collectively as a unit. I could disagree with the Premier and his policies without being disagreeable, but for me, I want to bring solutions to the table for us. How are we going to help the people of this territory, help the residents, the visitors, and everybody who have called the BVI home, to get our economy back up and running? I think that is first and foremost how we're going to keep our people safe, and we have to find a balance. Like I continue to say, Ron, we have to find a way to coexist with COVID-19 in this territory if we're to survive as a territory and as a people. And I look forward to more open conversation and open dialogue on a plan and a way forward. Tourism is critical to that, and I hope and I pray that the Premier and his team listens. I hope that they come up with a sensible and a practical and a pragmatic plan to get us open by September, to get out in a way to keep our people safe, to get the economy rolling again, and for us to just keep moving and building. And as we come out on the other side of COVID-19, a stronger Virgin Islands.
Thank you, Honorable Penn, so much for stopping by. Viewers, you heard it here first on 284 Media, quite a lot as it pertains to the recent happenings in the state of the territory here in the British Virgin Islands. Please do enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Friday, everybody. Bye-bye.